And now it is with great pleasure that I introduce the great Darrin Hagen.
That's the shortest introduction I have ever had.
We want you.
Hey, everybody, how's it going? So we've been dealing with a lot of queer history stuff for the last little while. I know everyone's fascinated by reliving the stories and the trials and tribulations of the queer community's past. And I'm one of those people. I'm fascinated by it. It enrages me. It inspires me. I'm very passionate about making sure those stories get told. But this time when I was approached for this session, the request was, let's do something more fun. Let's do something a little more fun. And so I thought it would be really fun to talk about what it was like to be a drag queen in the media in the pre-RuPaul days, before anybody knew what to do with a drag queen in the old days. And so I've got some photos that we can show you and a whole bunch of stories about my life as a drag queen and what it's like to actually go out and shoot TV shows and things like that in full drag. So a little bit of background. I grew up in Rocky Mountain House. Most of you know all this stuff, but I'll just give a primer so that we have the landscape here. I grew up in Rocky Mountain House, and I graduated in 1982 when I was 18 and moved directly to Edmonton. Edmonton was going to be just a stop. I wasn't planning on staying here, but I thought it's the place where I had family here. I knew I could move in with my aunt and get my foot in the door here in Edmonton and get my foot on the ground as an adult. And then eventually I would probably move to Vancouver or Montreal or Toronto or someplace where there was a lot more fruits, because I knew I needed to be around a queer community. Within minutes of landing in Edmonton, I had found Flashback and the queer community of Edmonton. And although it seemed like a small town at the time, I never left. Good things kept happening to me in Edmonton, and so I've always fallen back on the phrase, I don't leave Alberta. I haven't left Alberta because Alberta deserves me. Alberta created me, and so Alberta deserves to have me stick around. They have to deal with the ramifications of what they've created. And so I thought I'd tell a few stories about drag and about being a public drag queen at a time when being drag was unusual, even dangerous, and when we still didn't have equality here. And I've got a dog that's barking. Sorry, it's going to happen now and then whenever a mailman or someone passes by. So I saw my first drag show Halloween 1982. So I moved here in June, right after graduating. I worked at Cole's bookstore for the summer, and then that Halloween I saw my first drag show at Flashback, and I was transported. Doesn't even begin to cover what that experience was like, because it was so life-changing and so life-altering, and it just changed everything about my future and about my impressions of what the world was going to be and about where I fit into the world. And I knew that I would never be the same again. I wanted to do drag desperately, but I also didn't want to admit that out loud, because within the queer community, there was a lot of people that looked down on drag. I mean, a lot of the gay community looked down on drag. And it was this weird mix of being elevated and exalted on a pedestal, and at the same time being, kept down and repressed because you were effeminate and didn't fit into the stereotype of what a gay man should be. And so I struggled with, I wanted to be asked to do drag. I didn't want people to think it was my idea. I wanted it to just kind of happen to me. And so I'll never forget, the song It's Raining Men came along, and I was a huge fan. This is the first time it came out, and I was a huge fan. And at Flashback, we got to dance on the speakers. There was the speakers by the side of the dance floor, and anyone that wanted to really show off that they had some moves would jump up on the speaker for their favorite song, push off whoever was there already, and do the whole number. And word got around that I had some good moves, and I knew every lip sync, I knew every word, and I never missed a lip sync. And I'll never forget the day I kind of auditioned for my first drag show. It was a Thursday night at Flashback. I was one of the only people in the club, but that song came on, and on the empty dance floor, I stood on that speaker and did the entire number. And I looked down, and Empress 7, Mrs. K, was standing there watching me. And she had been sent there because she had been told that there was this young boy that wanted to do drag that would probably be a good drag queen. And so the next week, Mrs. K asked me to do a show. And so my very first drag show was January 14th, 1983. That's when Gloria was born. So it's, oh my God, it's like 40 years in January. Is that right? 83 to 2003. I can't do math. That's about right. 40 years. Oh my God. See, I just, wow, that's a long time. So yeah, it was almost 40 years ago that I first stepped on stage in drag. I'll never forget buying my first pair of shoes at Tall Crest Shoes, which was in Edmonton Center, where I don't know what's there now, but there used to be an HMV that faced where everyone sits and waits for their bus. And to try on shoes, of course, they would bring you a stocking. The ladies that worked in Tall Crest Shoes never said a word about guys coming in to try on shoes. They were used to it. But they would hand you a stocking, and in front, there was a glass wall full of people waiting for their bus as I sat there and tried on high heels and tried walking around for the first time. I'll never forget taking the #1 bus down Jasper Avenue in January in the dark, on an early sort of late afternoon bus towards home with the shoes in my lap in the box, and just knowing that my life would never be the same again, because it was such a huge step out of what everybody expected the world to be. Somehow I made it through that first show, and it was a hit. But I'll never forget standing there on stage with my back to the audience, and all I could feel was trembling. My legs were just shaking before I turned around and before the number actually started, before the vocals started. So it was a hit. And I got asked to do other shows, and I started, and that was the beginning of my life as a drag queen in Edmonton. And from that point on, it was just a matter of time before I ran into a drag queen named Lulu, who became my best friend and my drag mother, my sister, my goddess. And it was just the two of us against the world. Wow. Sorry, I didn't realize this would get so emotional. A lot of these memories are so deep. And as soon as I mention Lulu's name, of course, I get overcome with all this decades of memories. So I ran for Ms. Flashback, but no, first Lulu ran for Empress. Lulu decided she was going to run for Empress. And we like to pride ourselves as like the new guard, because we were so radically different than the rest of the old queens that we were looking at. Because that's the thing, 20-year-olds know everything, right? They think the whole world revolves around them, and we were no exception. So Lulu ran for Empress against Mary Mess and lost. It was quite a scandal. But Lulu was just a little too street worthy. She was working the streets at the time as a sex worker, and the two of us thought that was completely normal, but of course the rest of the world didn't. And then after that, Lulu ran for Empress again the next year, but before that I ran for Ms. Flashback, and I actually won. Now, the story of how I became Ms. Flashback, I was running with Mrs. K, who became Mr. K and became my running mate for the title of Mr. and Ms. Flashback. This is 1984. And we had the mother of all big finishes in store for the voting night. We were going to do Sonny and Cher, and there was a little person. His name was Ricky. He was a dwarf who wanted to do drag, and we dressed him up as Chastity. So we did Sonny and Cher, and we did I Got You, Babe. And at the end of the number, as the number was finishing, suddenly Chastity walks out on stage with a big sucker, and the crowd went insane. I've never heard a roar. Like, we couldn't even hear the lyrics. We just stood there and waved and held on to our little girl. And I won because of that drag queen. That drag queen later became named Yoda, and she ran for Empress against Aura Fizz a few years later. So I became Ms. Flashback. I did my whole year as Ms. Flashback, had a great time. And then I kind of never left that job as Ms. Flashback. I stayed in the position of running the drag shows at Flashback for the rest of the time that Flashback was open until I got fired. I moved into performing in the mainstream world when in 1987, Flashback, my husband and I met my husband at Flashback too. He was one of my best customers. And we started a drag troupe called Guys in Disguise that did our very first Fringe in 1987, 35 years ago this summer. So this summer when we do the Fringe, it'll be our 35th anniversary of Guys in Disguise, which again is just insane. So really 5 years after I did drag, I was already kind of going pro. Oh, I will tell you, my first pro gig was actually my second time in drag. There was a strip agent in town named Myrna Green. She ran a burlesque exotic dancer company called Green's Artists, and she supplied strippers to bars all over Alberta, all over the province. And she decided to try something new, and she approached me and Lulu and said, do you guys want to do a show? Instead of showing up with strippers, we're going to show up with drag queens. And we were like, sure, because we're idiots. And we said yes to anything back then. And we actually went, my very first professional gig, I kid you not, was in the bar on Main Street in Gibbons, Alberta. And it was me and Lulu and another drag queen named Candy. It was my second time in drag. I had no idea what I was doing. I can't believe I said yes. And we went and we got ready in the hotel room upstairs. We walked into the bar where all the guys were expecting strippers to walk in, and me and Lulu walked in instead. So I did my number. I only had one number. Lulu held the show. I'll never forget. It was the first time I'd seen a drag queen. And we were like 19 years old. Lulu held that crowd in the palm of her hand. When they started to get ugly, she got uglier and she pulled it right back on them. I'll never forget one of the strip fans who was drunk said, "Yeah, we want to see some pink." And Lulu pulled out her breast out of her dress and slammed it on his table and said, "There, now shut up and shut your hole, honey, because mine's making money." And the crowd laughed, and before you knew it, they were all on our side. It was quite amazing. So in the car on the way home, because it was we got through it, but it was a tragic gig. We got through it, and in the car on the way home, I'll never forget, because all the queens knew that we were doing a pro gig, and they all kind of laughed at us because we were nowhere near ready for that. And I said, "Oh my God, what are we going to tell people?" And Lulu looked at me like I was insane. She went, "Are you kidding? We tell them it was fabulous." I went, "But it wasn't." She went, "But they don't know that." And so we walked in the bar and everyone was like, "So how was your first pro gig?" We went, "Oh my God, it was fabulous." And we were professional queens. And that's how myths are created. That's how legends are created. So Lulu and I ended up taking over the drag scene in Edmonton for a few years, until Guys in Disguise happened. And then Lulu ended up moving to Toronto. And Guys in Disguise kind of became the tour de force at the Fringe for a few years. What was interesting was I had no idea how. And let's pull up. Eric has some photos that I wanted to show off about taking drag out of the bar and into public. Is kind of one of the most daunting things about being a drag queen. It's one thing to do drag within a bar. So let's see. Okay, so this first poster, the Wild Sorority Sisters from the Planet Playtex proudly present a salute to trailer court women. If you look, we actually got in drag on a Saturday afternoon and drove to trailer courts all around the city and stood in front of people's homes and took pictures. So that's Mrs. K is the one who's in the kerchief and the apron waving. Lulu is behind her in a white dress and white wig, and I'm standing off to one side with a weird black curly wig on, waving. That was our very first drag show that we ever put together at Flashback. I think that's probably 1984. The best thing about this is the only photo I have from this photo shoot, but we did hundreds of photos in trailer courts all around the city. And the big finale, this is the best part, the big finale, it was a Saturday afternoon, and we decided to finish the photo shoot day by parking the car outside the legislature, and we walked into the park at the legislature where the big fountain is, and there was hundreds of people suntanning and hanging out with their families and having picnics, and suddenly all these drag queens came in, and we proceeded to get out of drag in the giant fountain in front of everybody while people took pictures. It was amazing. Somewhere there's a picture of Lulu, because she had a pillow under her dress to make her look pregnant, and there's a picture of Lulu floating on her back in the giant fountain in front of the legislature, and her pillow it's just floating above the water. So that was a fun shot. Let's just scroll through some of these photos, because some of these photos have their own story. So this will help me get. So this is the very first year we did Guys in Disguise in 1987 at the Fringe. This is the first time we ever did pictures in and out of drag. And I'll never forget when all the boys in Guys in Disguise realized for the first time, what do you mean people are going to see who we were out of drag? They hadn't anticipated the fact that their boy names would be in the paper. And there was actually a big discussion within the group, because there was a lot of people that were in the group that were not ready to have their names in the paper. They were okay with having the picture in paper as a drag queen, but we released all these photos to the media, and we had to have that meeting amongst us. So just so you guys know, Neon, my friend Shannon, Kimberly, Tallulah, Orifice, Twiggy, and Nellie Michael, and me. I'm the tall one in the back, of course. Let's see the next shot. I have no idea what order these are going to come up in. This is a few years later. I'm not in this shot. This is Twiggy, Christopher Peterson, Mandy, and Kimberly. These dresses were bought at Dot's Discount Fashions for $10 each. They were the best photo shoot ever. I mean, look at them. The girls look amazing. We watched them once, and the dresses literally just fell apart. They were so cheap. So that's the only picture of these dresses. But we loved taking the queens out into public and doing the photo shoots out in public, because you could always get really amazing reactions from passersby and stuff. Let's see the next shot. The next shot is, yes, this one, we actually made them, we told everyone to wear black and white, and we took them out to a dairy farm outside of Edmonton. So that we could, of course, Kimberly wore not black and white, Mandy and Twiggy even has cow print on her shoulder. Look at that, she looks fantastic. This is the cleanest shoot, the photo that we got out of that photo shoot. We actually made them go into the cow barn and we took pictures of them in the cow shed, like surrounded by poop and stuff like that. It was pretty funny. They were disgusted and horrified, of course. What's the next shot here? The next shot, yes. So this is me and Christopher Peterson. Christopher Peterson, when he first showed up in 1993 to do by this time we were doing our BYOV at Rebar. And Christopher Peterson is my friend he was former Empress of Vancouver. He's actually an East Coast boy from Moncton, New Brunswick, who did drag for his first time in Halifax. I met him when Lulu was Empress. Christopher was also the Empress of Vancouver. We brought him into town because he was doing his own impersonations. And so this Lucille Ball outfit got him on the front page of the Journal at the Fringe that year. But this photo, we actually brought an I Love Lucy tape to London Drugs on Stony Plain Road there and 104th and 116th. We went to the London Drugs where they had a wall of TVs, and we made the cashier put our I Love Lucy tape into the TVs so that we could have Lucy, and we actually stood in front of the bank of TVs and did these photos. So this show is called TV, Transvestite Television. What's the next photo? Okay, so the next photo is so after we got finished with doing the drag shows, I wrote my first one-man play. And this is the Edmonton Queen, Not a Riverboat Story. And we decided to do the photo this is my mermaid tail, which by the way, made its debut in 1987. It's not a very practical outfit because once your mermaid tail's on, you can't go anywhere in it. You're just stuck wherever you are. So they put me in a dinghy with a harp, and you can't see that. I've got some shots of me with an accordion. There's one coming up. But we were in there, and this time we were actually we did this without permission. We didn't ask the Edmonton City Hall if we could have permission to film here. So we just set me afloat and started taking pictures. And we were waiting for someone to come and try and arrest us so that we could actually get photos of us, talking to security guards and whatnot. So we're out there for an hour, and it's actually really hard because dinghies don't stay in one place, right? They kind of wander around as the wind. So they had to keep pulling me back to shore and sending me out again. And I'd pose, and we get as many pictures as we could before I floated out of view again. And finally, just at the end of the photo shoot, some guy came towards us in a uniform, and he came out of City Hall. And I was like, okay, get ready. Here it comes. He's going to tell me I can't be here, and we can make a big scene. It's going to be a big political moment. And he said, excuse me. And I went, yes, sir. And he went, I just wanted to let you know the fountains are about to come on, and I don't want you to get your accordion wet. Oh, there's the accordion shot. This shot ended up being when I won the Edmonton Artist Trust Fund Award in 1997, I think it was. This photo ended up becoming a greeting card that you could buy from the Edmonton Arts Council to show what kind of a city Edmonton is. So I love that shot. That mermaid tail has gotten me on more covers, and there's been more, considering it's an outfit that I've never worn on stage more than just once. It's my parade outfit. It makes it into a lot of parades. It's a good photo op. So then the next shot, okay, so after the Edmonton Queen, I did a show called Tornado Magnet, a salute to trailer court women. And this shot, again, I have a thing about showing up in trailer courts and drag. What's that about? You can take the boy out of the trailer court, but everyone knows that I grew up in a trailer court, but you can't take the trailer court out of the boy. This trailer court is no longer here. If you're driving north on Fort Road, it was the last trailer court on the right, just before you hit the Manning Freeway overpass. It's now a you store it kind of place. But for the longest time, this trailer court was one of those ones that was once far out of the city, but then the city kind of grew around it. And this is another case where we literally just showed up with me looking like that. And we all piled out of the car, and Ian Jackson started taking pictures of me as I played accordion down the street of the trailer court. One of my favorite photos ever, this shot. What do we got next? Oh, if you ever want to wonder if a drag queen bursts into flames when she's on the step of a church, no, she doesn't. Because this is for Little Orphan Tranny, which was a religious thriller that we did in 1998. And then the next shot, this is the third part of the sequel, Tran of Green Gables. We took this shot. I fucking love this picture. We took this shot on, it's the LRT station by the Ledge, just before you cross the high level bridge. This is the little sort of place where you can get onto the trolley car that takes you over the bridge. And then the next shot, okay, so the next shot has a good story behind it. So this is the steps of the legislature. I've been in some pretty famous places in Edmonton in drag. So We wanted to do the photo. This is a photo shoot for the Loud and Queer Festival, or the Loud and Queer Cabaret. And we wanted to make a political statement. So that's actually Gosha Gamelan, who was a drag king at the time. She was in drag. And I, of course, am in drag as the bride. And it was November, as you can see, there's snow on the steps of the legislature. So it was a bitterly cold day. But my husband, who normally is with me for photo shoots, because I don't go out in drag alone. It's not safe. And plus, I'm kind of helpless in drag. Like once I'm in my outfit, I can't really do anything. The outfit is complicated. I'm in heels. It's just not a good thing to be alone. But he had to work and couldn't stick around. Plus, he wasn't involved in the photo shoot at all. So I made a date to meet my co-model and the photographer at the steps of the legislature at a certain time. And everyone was late. So I stood like that by myself in November weather, dressed like a bride for 15 minutes before anybody showed up. So that was one of those moments where I realized how vulnerable you are when you're in drag out there by yourself. Okay, what's the next shot? Oh, years later, I did a show called Who's on Top for the Life Channel, where it was all about the battle of the sexes. And I had to do things like show up at 4 o'clock in the morning at the White Mud Equine Reserve to stand next to a horse to do live television or to tape some television. So this particular morning, I'll never forget, in order to be on location at 6 a.m. for the beginning of shooting, that means drag makeup has to start at about 3 a.m. And so Twiggy would stay over at my house the night before after a long night at the bar. And then I would wake her up after 2 hours of sleep because, you know, she's a late girl. And we would put on my makeup, just the face. And then we would get in the car and go to the gig. And then we would finish putting on the costume once we were at the gig. But the makeup was always done at my house in my apartment. And I'll never forget this particular day. I'll never forget it. Do you guys all know who the artist Peter Field is? He used to work with the First Night Festival. He's a visual artist in town. He had been away in Holland. He had moved there for a few years. And I'll never forget, I had full face of makeup on, and we were on our way to the gig, and I realized this has happened to me so many times. Oh my God, we're almost out of gas. And I have like $5 in coins in my pocket. So we have to stop and get gas basically. So we stopped at the gas station on 109th and White Avenue there, the Esso station. And Twiggy, I think, why didn't Twiggy do it for me? I don't know. Maybe Twiggy didn't know how to work a pump because she doesn't drive. Who knows? I can't remember. But for some reason, oh no, she was going to go in and pay and I was going to fill it up. That's how it worked. So Twiggy was in the station and I'm thinking, well, at least it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to see anyone I know here. I've got full drag face on and a winter parka and a toque, right? And so I'm pumping my gas and I hear Darrin, and I look up and it's Peter Field, who just flew in from Holland after 2 years away. And the first thing he sees is a drag queen in the freezing cold pumping gas into the car. So that was one of the Who's on Top was amazing because we did 2 full seasons, which is 12 episodes. And every one of those episodes featured tons of out in public drag shoots. West Edmonton Mall, White Avenue, Daddy-O's restaurant, the White Mud Equine Reserve, not a roller skate park, a skateboard park. We had to do all sorts of outdoor things. And again, back to City Hall. What's the last shot here that we've got here? This is me on the steps inside City Hall in a Halle Berry knockoff original that was based on the outfit that she wore while she was wearing when she won her Oscar. These are all shots from Who's on Top. So there's some fun photos from sort of being out in public and drag. Oh, this one, I forgot about this one. So, okay, this is actually a good story. So when I first wrote the Edmonton Queen, of course, the boat started at the same time as the play. So the very first day I did my very first reading of the Edmonton Queen for the Fringe Preview Cabaret, the headline on the paper on the front page of the journal was Edmonton Queen set sail today. So I always kind of took it as a good luck sign that me and the boat started at the same time. And every time that boat made the papers, there was all these jokes I could make about the fact that, oh, look, they're writing about me again. And it happened over and over and over again. In fact, when I launched the book, a couple of years later, I was on my way to Vancouver to do the book launch at Doll and Pennies on Davie there, and or on Davie, Granville, never mind, one of those streets. And I was on the plane and I opened up the journal and the headline on the front page of the journal was Edmonton Queen almost crushed by ice, because that was the day that they had let a whole bunch of water out of the Bighorn Dam in Rocky Mountain House where I grew up, and the ice had risen and the Edmonton Queen had been pushed off to the side, and they were worried that it was going to be crushed. So I got to go to Vancouver and tell people that no, in fact, I had not been crushed by ice, that I was totally fine. This kind of thing happened over and over again. So when we first came up with the name for the play, which was stolen directly from the boat, we actually called up the Edmonton Queen to say, Darrin wants to do a photo shoot on the boat in drag. Is that okay for his fringe play? And they said yes. So I got into this outfit. I did my makeup. I had my hair done. I had my dress on. And I said, okay, call the boat and tell them we're on our way. And they never answered the phone. And we tried and tried and tried, and they never answered the phone. They basically chickened out. So we ended up, this photo in this dress was ended up being taken at the Edmonton Journal photo studio, because Ian Jackson, who took the photo, had connections with the Edmonton Journal. And we also did a show. We also, after this, we actually went to the farmer's market because it was a Saturday afternoon. And there's some amazing pictures of me shopping in the farmer's market in this outfit, dressed as Inga, the supermodel, including my favorite shot, which I have not been able to find lately, but it does exist, of me buying broccoli from a Hutterite lady who looks very unimpressed by the by the giant glamazon in front of her. So there's some stories behind some of these photos that you may have seen over the years. But it's interesting being a person who's in drag in public. I actually started a little document of some of the stories of things that have happened to me over the years. And it kind of makes me go, wow, there's actually probably a book here, just in Gloria's journey through, you know, sort of the Edmonton media and what it's like to navigate the media landscape in a town where the media doesn't have the language to describe what it is that you're doing. You have to remember that, of course, you know, we didn't have the language to describe gender that we have nowadays. And the whole fluency and that kind of fluidity just didn't exist back then. I wanted to say one more thing about the Edmonton Queen, about the boat. A while ago, I was watching, I saw a news story in the National Post on the Edmonton riverboat. And the story actually said, the boat formerly known as the Edmonton Queen. And I went, I won. Because for a good decade, if you Googled the Edmonton Queen and then clicked images, half the pictures were of the boat and half the pictures were of me. And so I guess the boat finally gave up and let me have it. So it's my title officially now. They can't take it away from me now. So it did, this whole exercise did remind me of some stories. The first fringe parade that I ever did in that mermaid tail, I was sitting on the hood of a 1957 Pontiac owned by someone who used to work with Boots and Saddles, who loved collector cars. And I was wearing the mermaid outfit, and Twiggy and Neon were with me walking along beside it, because of course in the mermaid outfit you have to be driven around or carried around. You can't walk anywhere. Excuse me. There we go. And we managed to make the 6 o'clock news on CFRM. And I'll never forget that as I was passing by one of the cameras along the route, I went, "Hey, how's it going?" to the camera. And my grandma phoned me the next day and said, "Was that you on TV last night?" And it was funny because she never would have recognized me, except I had to open my big mouth and say hi to the camera. She recognized my voice instantly. So that's how I came out to my drag queen, as a drag queen to my grandma. We did that first fringe in '87, and it was out of control popular. Like, it was impossible to get a ticket to. We had no idea how ready Edmonton was for that kind of an experience. And so when we did the show a few years later, at the Rebar space where we took over as BYOVs for years, we did our first holdover, and we actually, our only prop for the show, we did this number called Hairspray, not from the movie, but a different song called Hairspray. And so to create the special effect, we had a 7-foot hairspray can built with a smoke machine attached to it, so that we could, like, everyone could pretend that they were getting their hair done on stage. And then we got held over, and we were like, nobody has a vehicle big enough for this huge hairspray can. So we had to rent a school bus for 4 drag queens and a crew of 2. And we toured to Spruce Grove, St. Albert. Was it Spruce Grove? Yeah, Spruce Grove, St. Albert. And we did the brand new Festival Place that had just opened up in Sherwood Park. And when we got to Festival Place, we outsold Leona Boyd. We had 550 people in the audience. It was the biggest crowd that they'd ever had in that brand new room so far. And I'll never forget Christopher Peterson dressed as Marilyn Monroe. Backstage, we had a little toast of champagne, and he went, "Well, congrats, girls. This is probably about as legit as this 2-bit drag show is ever going to get." Little did she know. A few years later, because I have lots of friends in the media, because I'm in theater as well as being a drag queen, people that I had worked with over the years, like Neil Grahn from 3 Dead Trolls and a Baggie, who's had a long history with working with CBC with different TV productions. He was hosting a show called Rough Cuts. And so he called us up and said, we want to do a story on guys in disguise. And I'm like, sure, what does that mean? He went, well, it's a long day. We want to film you, we interview you, we want to film you getting in drag, the whole process. And that's generally what people ask for when they want to do something about a drag show. They want to see the process. So we not only shopped at Value Village that day for outfits to wear, then we went to a photo studio downtown where we spent hours getting in drag, complete with the big shave. We did the whole process for them. And after we were in drag and we'd posed for all these photos, they said, okay, well, let's go out now. And I went, it's Tuesday. The only place that's open is the Roost. And Neil went, we would love to get footage of you guys going to the Roost. And I'm like, are you kidding? I never go to the Roost, especially not in drag, especially not on a fucking Tuesday. But he wanted the footage. So we went to the Roost, and all four of us, it was Mandy and Kimberly and Twiggy and me. And we let them film us walking in the front door of the Roost. And then we went inside, we pretended to dance around for an hour or two, and they took all the footage that they could get. And then they ended up using all of this. And it ended up being a really nice little story, a nice little sort of 10-minute package about guys in disguise. So I don't know how many people in this chat will remember this, but a little while after that, there was a story about an incident that happened at the Roost that made huge waves in the local news. And it was a woman claimed that she had been raped in the men's bathroom at the Roost. And when the story hit, the media jumped all over it as proof that these gay bars were dens of iniquity and places where awful things were going to happen. And when they wanted to show the Roost, guess what footage they used? Because CBC, they produced rough cuts. And so they took the footage of us entering the Roost in full drag and used it for the rape story. And here's the part that really pissed me off. And I called up CBC, I was livid, because a week later, the girl recanted. She hadn't been raped at the Roost. She'd been caught having sex in the bathroom with their boyfriend at the Roost. And a whole bunch of people had caught her and were cheering on the guy because they were all, that's what happens in a gay bar when someone's caught having sex in a cubicle. So it was one of those, and of course the media all recanted quietly. They never really took the story back. They just kind of did their little disclaimer and then kind of moved on. But that footage of us that we had, by the way, when Rough Cuts does a story on you and takes up 12 hours of your fucking life, they don't pay you for that. They're creating free television with you as the content. And then CBC felt like they had the right to use that content however they wanted after that, even if it was a story that was defamatory or incorrect. And even though I had only been to the Roost once that year for that shoot, because I never went to the Roost on a Tuesday night. So that was a rough moment where I realized how vulnerable, you do everything you can to help the media to get them good pictures, and then they will turn around and use that footage in a way that's not conducive to helping people appreciate your career. That's for sure. Then the Mermaid Incident, I'll never forget. I got hired in 1994, I think it was. I got hired to do the Edmonton Street Fest for the first time ever. And I decided I would do 10 characters in 10 days. Big mistake. But the most famous character, of course, was my mermaid tail. And I thought, oh, I get to bring the mermaid out. By this time, The Little Mermaid was a huge hit movie. All the kids loved the mermaid. I had long red hair, the whole bit. And so I thought, I'll take the mermaid to the street fest. That'll be something the kids will love. But of course, you can't walk in the mermaid tail. So I decided that I would be kind of a sculpture on top of the ticket booth. There's a ticket trailer in the middle of the square. And so I had to go out there. I had to go over there just wearing my boy clothes. I would go behind the trailer. One of the guys that worked at the Street Fest brought a ladder, and I climbed up the ladder, pulled off my pants. I had a Speedo on underneath, quickly pulled on the mermaid tail, put the bra in place, put on my glasses, wrapped some fabric around me, took my harp, and I posed. And I went, okay, young man with the ladder, you can leave now. And my shift was 2 hours long. So within 5 minutes, I realized I made a huge mistake because it's noon in July and I'm on a hot tin roof in a spandex sock, basically. So I'm frying my ass and I'm trying to sort of shift back and forth. And it's immediately, I've realized this is one of those, I'm famous for coming up with, oh, this will be a great idea. And then I actually get there and the execution of it is always way more complicated than I think it's going to be. So I realize I've made a huge mistake, but I'm stuck with it for 2 hours until the ladder comes back. There's no way I can get out of it. So I'm sort of trying to pose. A couple of people take pictures. I'm having a little bit of fun. And then this little kid stops in front of me and he just looks up and he's like, oh, the Little Mermaid. And I go, hey kid, how's it going? And his jaw just drops. And I realize, oh no, right. He thinks mermaids are only girls. And now I've just revealed that I'm a man. And he started asking me questions, hard questions about mermaids and about why are you a boy and how come you're not in the water over there. And then at one point, some businessmen went by and I sort of did a pose and my little bra slipped and he went, I just saw your boy tit. And it went on for about 20 minutes. And finally he said, you can't be a mermaid. You are a man. You are a man. And it was noon, which means the Street Fest crowd at noon is all preschoolers and business people having lunch. So it's not your normal crowd. The preschoolers are in gangs of 40 connected with like ropes and one adult in charge. And basically every group of kids that came up to see him chanting at me would start chanting along with him. And for the next 2 hours, I had to endure that for 2 hours. But wait, it gets worse because the Edmonton Journal was there and they took a picture of it. And there's a photo of me on the front page of the entertainment section looking down at the little boy just as this whole thing starts. It's a beautiful photo. You would never know that the next 2 hours were like the biggest hell of my showbiz career. And then the videographer who did all the video work for the Street Fest actually filmed it happening. And 30 years later, when the Street Fest did the 30th anniversary clip reel, guess what clip is in there? Every now and then, Jesse Gervais, who's a local actor, will phone me up and go, oh, I just watched it again, dude. It was so funny because it's on video for all time. And I swear, at my funeral, they're going to play that fucking clip and laugh and laugh and laugh. I'll never forget once I was doing the AIDS walk out in Rundle Park, and I had short blonde hair that year, and I had this outfit that was basically, I called it my Star Trek jumpsuit with a tit-to-toe red stripe. So it was basically a black jumpsuit, big red stripe. I would put big balloon tits in place, and I had short blonde hair. Do you remember Susan Powder? She was a fitness guru at the time. She had short blonde hair, but she was kind of stacked like that too. And so I was kind of doing her, and they saw that outfit and said, you should come and lead the warm-up for the AIDS walk. And I was like, sure, $50 is $50, I'll do the gig. So I show up alone, big mistake, in my tiny little gold Mazda sports car, which I didn't buy, by the way, my husband did. I would never buy something like that because I could barely fit into it. But I show up and I go to do the warm-up, and it's a complete clusterfuck. Like, nobody's paying attention to me. Nobody really needs me there. I'm kind of in drag looking like an idiot for no reason at all, right? I'm wearing a leather jacket, this ridiculous outfit, my blonde spiky hair, sunglasses, the whole bit. And so then the AIDS walk starts and I go, well, that was kind of lame, but oh well. And I got back in my car, and on the way home, I realized, oh no, the needle is on empty. And I was faced with two options. One is take the chance and try to get home on what little gas you have and risk running out of gas halfway across the high level bridge dressed like Susan Powder, or stop at a full serve and make some poor teenage boy look at you as you and make him fill up your car. So I decided that one person being embarrassed at the gas station was preferable to me being humiliated repeatedly in the middle of like the Capilano Bridge. So I pulled up to a Domo full serve, and the poor kid came up to the window. And all I can do in situations like this is make my voice as masculine as possible. And I'm just like, $10 a regular, please. And I just don't make eye contact. Just don't even look. And the poor kid was probably having conniption fits. But so that's one of those things that you have to constantly deal with when you go out in drag. There was a year at the Fringe when the men's rights advocates, sort of the anti-feminist group, the MRA, they decided that they would vandalize all the posters at the Fringe of shows that had women on the posters. And for some reason, they didn't figure out that guys in disguise meant guys in disguise. And so all of our posters got vandalized by the anti-feminist crowd one year. That was an interesting thing. There was also the year at the Fringe. A lot of the stuff has happened at the Fringe, of course, because we do the Fringe every year. The Edmonton Journal called up the Fringe and they offered free advertising to any troupe that the Fringe thought would be a good draw. And so the Fringe offered it to us, to Guys in Disguise. And so it was an ad for Tranny Get Your Gun, which is the byline was, it's about a private dick with a difference. And it was the first of the series of the three that we did. And the Journal editorial department, or the Journal ad department, refused to run the ad. And I called them up and I had a huge long discussion with them and said, like, what's going on? And they went, we just don't think it's right for a family paper. I'm like, but you realize that the Journal is going to review the show. So you can't keep the name out of the paper. The name is going to be like, they review us every year. So you're saying I'm good enough to sell papers, but I'm not good enough to give the ad to, and she just kept saying the same thing over and over again. So we ended up not getting our free ad, and that became its own weird little kind of scandal that year. I remember when we were filming Who's on Top, that TV show, one of the places that we had to film was actually West Edmonton Mall. And there was 3 things that happened there. There was one day when we were leaving, Twiggy and I were on our way back to the car, and I saw a bra shop, and I said, oh, get some pictures of me shopping for bras. And I got kicked out of the bra shop. Yeah, she asked me to leave. There was another day when I was at Fantasyland. I'm wearing my little black dress, and the mic slipped, and this guy who's a straight guy says, Darrin, I can't hear you anymore. And I'm like, oh shit, my mic slipped. He went, okay, well, can you grab it? And of course, this little black dress is so tight. I'm like, no, it's not going to happen, dude. And he went, he said, can you grab it from underneath? I'm like, look at me, this dress is so tight. No, there's no way. And he said, well, I guess you have to go into the bathroom and retrieve the mic. And I looked at him, and it was Fantasyland on Family Day, surrounded by kids. I looked at him and said, which bathroom, dude? Because if I go into the men's bathroom, I'm going to get beat up. If I'm going to go to the ladies' bathroom, I'll get arrested. And so this poor straight sound guy had to get on his knees and fish up underneath my dress to my sweaty, hairy belly and find the mic and push it back up to my neckline. So he got a real education that day, let me tell you that. That same day, we got into a car, the whole film crew got into a car accident, like just a fender bender as we left the mall. And the lady that ran into us was determined that we were going to stay there and wait for the police. And we're like, no, we are not staying. Here's the license number. Here's everything we need. So that's kind of the list of weird stories that I could think of off the top of my head for today. And I noticed that we only have a few minutes left. So I thought this would be a great time to open up to questions if anybody has any questions about drag or being in public in drag or ridiculous things that have happened in drag. Larry is holding up his hand.
I saw the Rake's Progress last week, and I thought of your performance as Mother Goose.
Oh my God.
You got any memories of that?
Oh my God, I can't believe you saw. Oh, okay. So that was when, what year was that? I still had long hair. So it's pre-19, I had long black hair too. So it was about 1999 probably, or 2000 that we did the Rakes. I got called up by the Edmonton Opera to perform a multiple role in the Rakes Progress. And it was my first time I'd ever been in an opera. I phoned my mom and I thanked her for every classical music lesson I'd ever had. Thank God I knew how to read music. Yeah, it was interesting because nobody's seen, like, I'll never forget the first day of rehearsal, because you're surrounded by these opera divas who show up completely off book. They know the show in and out, because that's in opera, that's you show up, you know the role, right? That's your thing. And so I had a bit part, and my first singing line wasn't until like 20 or 30 minutes into the show. And I'll never forget just standing there flipping through the sheet music as these amazing singers around me were doing their thing, and I'm getting more and more nervous. And then of course I opened my mouth and I started to sing. I think they thought I was going to do it in a falsetto, which I don't really have a falsetto anymore. Lulu and I blew that falsetto decades ago. So I sang it in my own voice, and they all kind of stopped and looked at me. And I remember the conductor, Bram Tovey, going, "That was very good. Would you like to do that again?" I went, "Please." And we did it again. And it was just a non-issue for the rest of the time. But I'll never forget Michael Cavanaugh, the director, coming up to me and saying, "You know, you are an opera performer. You might not be an opera singer, but you perform big, like in an opera." That was one of the most amazing experiences, because I got to work with three queer opera singers that had all been born in Alberta and then had moved away for big international success and then had come back. And it was very interesting to see what they had gone through to come back to their home province and what had changed in that time. I have a lot of memories about that. Most of them involved being terrified that I would screw up. Because there was one note.
You didn't.
No, I did. I didn't think. Did you actually see the opera that I was in?
Yes. Oh, yes. I saw your performance. It was splendid.
Oh my God. Oh my God, I loved that show so much. And I loved my outfits in that show. I've got a couple of really amazing pictures from that show too. That was when Christopher Peterson said, "This is about as legit as this two-bit drag show ever gets." He wasn't thinking that there might be an opera down the road. And I got to say, that was one of my showbiz highlights. Absolutely. Thank you for remembering that. Like that's what a treat. What a treat. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Thank you.
Or do you just want more stories? Let's see if I got. Oh yeah, Eric has this question.
I've seen a couple of readings that you've done, and the one about the bathhouse raid, is that going to be a production at some point in the near future, or have I already missed it?
No, we were really trying to have the play ready for the 40th anniversary of the raid, which of course was last May. Because of COVID, all that stuff got pushed back. And so then I called up Edmonton Arts Council, and I actually did an application to do an online documentary of the raid, which we got the money for. And then just as we were about to film it, COVID shut down the province again. And so we had to really scale back our concept of what it was going to be. But what we did create is actually on the on the Theatre Network website. It's called Works in Progress with Darrin Hagen. And it's not the play, but what it is it's a bunch of the transcripts that we had access to, read by, and this is so important, and what an illuminating moment. They were read by cold reads. We got young queer performers that were from the Edmonton scene to read stuff that had happened 40 years ago, because I don't think they really understood the depth of the homophobia in this province and the institutionalized homophobia that our generations were up against back then. And to see a 20-year-old read that stuff out loud and see the words start to sink in and see the reaction on their faces was just a riveting experience. So what you will see there is a bit of a taste of what the play could eventually be. But what's interesting is even by just doing that, we actually had a person, like for years, Michael Fair has been the only person to talk about the raids as a found-in that was there. Because of that little mini documentary that we did, the second found-in finally stepped forward and shared his story. And there's so many amazing details that he brought to the table that nobody had ever heard before. So that was a moment that was just so worth it. And so that is a production that will appear down the road. And I'm working on a book version of it too, because just as as the documentary hit, Chris Wells called me up and went, "Oh my God, the Edmonton police have just given me this whole huge treasure trove of new documents." And we went through them and found all these amazing details. Like, I've never wept so much while researching a project, like just how emotionally traumatic it is to go through some of the truths about that raid is just mind-blowing. So look for that stuff soon. I will draw your attention to the articles that I did for eCamp. There's a series of 6 articles that I did on the Edmonton City as Museum Project website that are the most extensive and detailed accounts of the raid and of the people that went through the raid that have ever been published so far. So, but there's more to come, absolutely. Penny and Joanne, hi, your hand is
Well,
up.
it's actually just Penny.
Well, yeah, your name says both. I can't do that.
Yes, it does. It definitely does. Hi, honey.
How are you?
I thought put my hand up before Eric was talking, and this is a really frivolous question. So
It's all good.
I feel like sorry because that.
No, there are no frivolous questions.
Everything you said is just, it's wonderful listening to what you're talking about. But I'm just wondering if you remember Panic, the game show.
Oh my God, yes. Yes. Were you there for that?
Yeah, I was one of the
Oh my-
celebrity judges.
Were you really?
I
Oh my God,
totally
I don't remember that. I
With
thought
Ross
you and I,
McLaughlin.
oh my God, Ross McBrock, we used to call him, who was the ITV reporter. So he was a sports reporter, wasn't he? That's right.
No, he
No,
was the anchor.
Oh, right. That's right.
Yeah.
I forgot that. I always think that you and I met when I was doing Prom Night of the Living Dead, and you interviewed me for View Weekly or C Magazine, whoever you were writing for at the time.
Edmonton Bullet at the time.
Edmonton Bullet. Okay, sorry. Yes, the precursor to C and View.
Precursor, yeah.
I forgot that you were a judge. Okay, so Panic was this game show that Dave Jackson put together. Dave Jackson eventually became the guy that opened up the Dance Factory, but he also hosted all the hell parties. And I'll never forget, it was, and the timing is hilarious because there was this game show called Panic where it was kind of like the Gong Show where you'd show up and do stupid things and try to win a prize. So I did my life serial number where I do Shirley Bassey's This Is My Life and I spit life cereal all over the audience.
It was great.
It's a living. And that number made me so famous. And I have literally, for a while, they discontinued that cereal and I couldn't do the number anymore. I go into a total panic whenever I walked into a grocery store and find it. But we did I'll never forget doing that. I think I did it a few times, didn't I? Because I made it through the semifinals right up to the finals.
Yeah, you
Uh,
actually did, yes.
I actually ended up winning, and the grand prize was a trip to Vancouver by Greyhound, non-refundable. I
Dave
thought at
never
least I could
mentioned
use,
that part.
yeah, they never mentioned that until they gave me the tickets, and I was like, so then I thought I could just use the money, and that was non-refundable, and I couldn't afford to go to Vancouver, so I never did
Oh.
get to go to Vancouver on that prize. I was ready to, but there was a football player that was also one of the celebrity judges, wasn't it, Mark? I don't know my football player.
Marco Sincar? Was that the
Is that
name?
right? I
I
can't remember. But
I
I have.
can't remember.
I still have the piece of paper he passed me his phone number on, just so you know.
Whoa.
Yeah, I know. But what was interesting was, as I got fired from, as I won Panic, I got fired from Flashback, and so Donna Maria Artuso wrote about it. There's actually my debut on sort of the Edmonton, non-gay bar stage happened when she actually wrote about the fact that I had been fired from Flashback, but not to worry that I had just won the Panic game show. So she saw brilliant things in my future, apparently, based on that. But just so you know, Donna Maria Artuso had been a celebrity judge. We did something called the Ms. Gay Cup pageant every year, where we would get a whole bunch of amateur drag queens to do like a swimsuit competition, the talent competition, the evening gown, the public speaking, the whole bit. And we hosted it for years. And Donna Maria Artuso was often our celebrity judge, and so she would write about it. So we had already made a few appearances in her column. Interestingly enough, the relationship between Page Six and the media is a long one. Wayne Krause had that column before Donna Maria Artuso had it, and he used to write about Trash, who was Miss Flashback 6, which is 3 years before I was Miss Flashback. And Trash was a very public drag queen. He would do drag on the streets of Edmonton. He was short, so he would show up at like Earl's on Halloween and just have the time of his life with a bunch of straight people. Trash was the one who ended up in the Klondike Days Parade. That story that's in my book of the drag queen in the Klondike Days Parade, that was Trash. So Wayne Krause had written about Trash a lot, including when David Hennessy and Trash had a huge fight just before the Halloween show, and Trash resigned in a huff because he couldn't play Marilyn Monroe. It got written about in the fucking paper. Like, I couldn't believe it. So Donna Maria Artuso carried on that tradition. I don't know who took over that column after she had it.
Graham Hicks.
Was it Graham Hicks came right after that?
Yeah, I think so.
There was nobody in between. Okay, because Graham Hicks and I had a long relation. Graham Hicks loved writing about me until we had a huge fight in, what year was the Queen in town? It was the centennial. It was 2005, right? And he wanted to know why the Edmonton Queen hadn't been invited to come see the Queen. And we had a long conversation. And then he printed a whole bunch of jokes that I'm quite positive I did not say that made me sound like a real dick. And I phoned him up and I screamed at Graham Hicks for an hour, and he never wrote about me again. But I used to get really mad that he would write all this stuff like anti-gay marriage stuff. Like he was a really hardcore born again. And so then he would claim that he was really good friends with me. And I was kind of like, yeah, I'm not really friends with anybody in the media. I use the media to move my career forward. They use me so that they have something interesting to write about, but it's not like we're friends. This is a weird symbiotic relationship that we've got. But Graham Hicks would like call me up and he would take me out for lunch and we would have arguments about, the existence of a higher power. And then he would print it all in his column the next day and say that I talked to my good friend Darrin Hagen about drag or about same-sex marriage. It's like, okay, don't call me your good friend, right? You're using me for your paper. But when he attributed a whole bunch of mean jokes about the Queen to me, I called him up and I gave him shit. And he never wrote about me again until years later. And I got to say, the last time he wrote about me was one of the last things he wrote. He wrote a review of me in his column when I did The Empress and the Prime Minister in 2019 at Theatre Network, which is about the decriminalization of homosexuality. And Graham wrote probably the nicest thing he's ever written about me ever in my career. It was like I think he finally got it. I think he finally clued in as to why queer people don't feel like we're included fully in society as participating members. And it was kind of and I had a couple of friends mock it because he made it sound so life-changing. And I was kind of like, don't mock people when they finally clue in. Like, it was life-changing for him. It doesn't matter that we got to that place 20 years earlier. That's not the point. The point is that I think he finally understands why him and I would have those conversations and why I was so unshakable in my belief system, and why his belief system could never shake me off of that. So it was interesting though, because Kevin my husband, Kevin, remembers Graham Hicks back from the old Lucifer days where they would go see live music together. And he always swore that Graham Hicks was a closet case. So just a little tidbit. Let's talk about queers in the media. How many of those that have been that we don't know about, right? That'll be another conversation someday. Ross McLaughlin we knew about, but he wasn't out on TV. That was the other weird, interesting thing. I did we're almost out of time, right? I'll make this quick. My first time on live television was a show called The Edge with my dear friend and Penny's dear friend, Claudine Rodney. I was brought in as a substitute, as a pinch hitter because her regular co-host was not there. The Edge was this weird live 2-hour free-for-all that was done on Videotron back then. It was kind of an experiment. But I came in and I'll never forget the first words out of Claudine's mouth were, "Hey, here's my new co-host, Darrin. Darrin, what did you do this weekend?" And I said, I was being loud and queer because I had just hosted Loud and Queer. Within my first sentence on live TV in Edmonton, I outed myself and made it permanent. that show that day, the theme was unions. And for 2 hours, we were interviewing guys that ran unions. And I actually said, this is great. I'm so glad this came up because this is a great story. I said, okay, so I'm not a union guy myself, but whatever. I said, so let's say the people I represent want to start a union. How would this go about? And they went, well, what do you do? And I said, well, let's say I represent 100 drag queens. We want to start a union. He said, well, the first thing you need to do is you need to find a name. And I went, okay, how about the Canadian Union of Drag Queens, CUDQ? So we called it CUDQ. And these two union bosses were totally legit and talking me through what it would take. And now I don't think they realized it was a phone-in show. So about 10 minutes into the conversation, people started phoning in, and I had drag queens like, yeah, okay, well, if we have a union, I want to make sure that we get full breaks and we get a cut of the bar, blah, blah, blah. And then I had straight guys calling up going, yeah, you better tell your friends, they better be careful if they get involved with a union because they'll lose all their rights. It was just, and there was this huge animated discussion on live television about whether or not drag queens should have their own union. And I thought that was 1994. 1993, maybe 1994. Yeah, that was my first TV gig, my first day on live TV. So I became eventually that got me my job on Help TV, and when Help TV became national, I became the first. And I've said this out loud and nobody has contradicted me. I'm ready to be proven wrong. I was the first out of the closet queer host of a national television show, the first out of the closet drag queen to host a national television show, and to talk about being a drag queen while not in drag. So it wasn't like I was on RuPaul's Drag Race or something like that. It was just a part of who I was, and I never hid it. And I just feel lucky that there was enough TV shows that allowed me to be that person on stage or on camera, live, uncensored. And it was, it never went wrong. It was always exciting. There was always people that would phone and complain, but no one ever told me I could never say that stuff. So good for Edmonton. Edmonton's a lot more progressive than people give it credit for. All right, I think we have a minute left.
Well, Darrin, that was fabulous. Do you have one final comment for us?
Oh my God, don't let me keep going because the next story will take an hour to tell. That's just
Those that need to go can sign off. No, thank you very much, Darrin. That was just so inspiring. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. I hope that we see you all next week when we will be entertained by the musical duo Northern Heart.
ooh.
Yes, and please fill out the survey that will be coming shortly. And thank you to Eric for your technical skills in running such a smooth meeting here. And thank you to all of you, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys at the Fringe. I have 2 Fringe shows coming up.
Oh, what are they?
One's called the Pansy Craze Cabaret, and the other's called Crack in the Mirror. One's at the Varscona, one's at the Roxy.
Good.
Make sure
Thanks,
that
Darrin.
everybody catch both. Okay.
Have a great
Thanks.
summer, everybody. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.